and gentlemen.
Welcome to the show. It's Movie Wire time. Oh, the Movie Wire. Bring the firing squad. Bill, Justin. Give the finger or laugh or smile. It's time to find out. No more waiting. So here we go. The Sultan of Cinema. The gumshoe of review. Here is Justin Henson. Let's start the show. Let's go.
Welcome to the Movie Wire.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We've got a big show this week with 3 new movies to review, with 2 playing in theaters and 1 that's in limited release in theaters and is now available in your respected VOD platforms. This week on the show, be careful who you assemble in Marvel's Thunderbolts. Making waves can be a deadly business. Nicolas Cage stars in The Surfer. And finally, redemption is a given. It's taken in Rust. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch a roar and a burst of flames. The Movie Wire podcast.
There it is.
Just meet people like me.
The Wire.
And here we go.
After finding themselves ensnared in a death trap, an unconventional team of anti-heroes must embark on a dangerous mission that will force them to confront the darkest corners of their past in Marvel's Thunderbolts, which, just a reminder, this will be a spoiler-free review.
Let's talk facts. The Avengers are not coming. Who will keep the American people safe?
There's some big threat out there, and you are gonna help me stop it.
Wait, us?
Yeah, you. Why, you got someplace to be?
I love that guy.
So none of us comply? So what, we all just punch and shoot?
I can't think of a worse group of people trying to work together.
Everyone here has done bad things. You can't escape the past. Hey, it's like your mind is somewhere else.
So you can do something about it now, or live with it forever.
This could get messy.
No shit. You thought you were gonna be some great saviors? You can't even save yourself.
We can't do this. No one here is a hero.
Lena, when I look at you, I don't see your mistakes. That's why we need each other.
Okay, that was really good.
We are the Thunderbolts!
Can't call ourselves that.
God, thank you.
This has makings of team that can rise to glory. Bring light from the darkness. This team can be the heroes on the Wheaties box. With a little kitty toy.
Alexei, have you slept?
I'll sleep when I'm dead.
I'd like not to die today, so maybe somebody else should be driving.
When it comes to a movie, you can always tell you're gonna have a good time when the song Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship pops up in the trailer of the movie soundtrack, even when it comes to Mannequin 2 on the Move. underrated movie. Anyway, it could be a horrible movie, but this just generates a good time, and Thunderbolts really does generate a good time, a good feeling. And here we go. Here is another Marvel film that I'm probably going to piss a fan off for. But I'll say this, again, I am not a comic book guy. I'm not a hardcore Marvel guy. And I'm going to say, the most enjoyable Marvel films to me have been the most simplistic. For example, the original of our original Avengers, to some of my favorite surprises. And I'll say it again for those that are standing up in their seats. I didn't say favorites, I said surprises, which are Shang-Chi and Guardians of the Galaxy. And I'll also add this, just to appease some of you. Endgame was a good forte to a crescendo of build from the original Marvel movies. But the most enjoyable Marvel films to me are going to be the most simplistic. But of course, how do you top something like Endgame? Characters that felt new, characters that were likable, stories that were intertwined of excitement of what's to come. Marvel hasn't done a good job with that lately. And if you disagree, then sit your ass down, because I think I hold the majority of people that agree with me. So that one person standing up disagreeing with me, sit your ass back down. And before we get into the review again, I'm not a comic book guy. I'm reviewing this just as a movie. If you're looking for more comic book lore, more in-depth review of this film, that's for my buddies over at Josh and Alex over the Talking Smack podcast. But holistically, Thunderbolts. And this is what I'm going to say about simplicity when it comes to Marvel movies. The best experiences I have is the heroes that are unknown to me, such as Guardians of the Galaxy, Shang-Chi, and now Thunderbolts. But Shang-Chi will be put more in the middle of that category with simplistic origin tellings of classic Marvel movies, while Guardians and Thunderbolts gave me the same fun experience with a balance of entertainment, humor, and heart, with unknown characters to me. At the same time, Guardians did it better with the balance of humor and heart, but Thunderbolts really does give us a spectacle of feelings. It's just the main problem is that it takes a long time. It takes a while for the fire to get going and to build it. And it doesn't land as successful as some of the previous Marvel films because it doesn't have that special chemistry. It doesn't have that special build of a team. Thunderbolts is an enjoyable ride, but I think the main problem I have with Thunderbolts is the mere fact it tries to give us that feeling of Avengers Assemble, but with characters a lot of us don't remember or not familiar with. But our writers Eric Pearson and Joanna Kahlo assume we do. So as we see these characters on screen, even though we feel a little emptiness on stakes with these characters, it feels like Marvel does go back to a simplistic roots with just a taste of elevated looks. We get some flashbacks of some emotional background of these characters that's inserted to not take up a ton of origin or screen time, which I did appreciate, and it does give us a good balance of not really spending too much time with these characters, but just giving us enough to care about these characters. With conflict, we do have to have a background, and here we do get the same stakes of a conflicting team that comes together for a high-stake conflict. We get a villain with a master plan. There's nothing new here, but at the same time, when we take a superhero film, do we judge a film on originality or fun? Like most films today, originality comes short. So at the end of the day, taking this film at face value, the question is, was it entertaining and fun? The answer has to be yes. I had a lot of fun with Thunderbolts. It never felt bloated with characters. It was a simple story. It had simple characters with some fun dialogue that a lot of times we can tell forces some humor and becomes a little overdone. For example, early in the movie, we're introduced to Bob, played by Lewis Pullman, who is trapped in a building with three of our heroes, John Walker, aka U.S. Agent, played by Wyatt Russell, Yolanda Belova, played by Florence Pugh, and Ava Starr, aka Ghost, played by Hannah John Kamen. Bob is the odd man out in the group in a hospital outfit, or should I say, the only one not in leather or wearing a mask. No, Thunderbolts goes all in with a running joke of the name Bob, and it did give me some chuckles. Bob's a funny name, but the humor tends to rely on just Bob. The overuse of names stereotyped as a less than fortunate common name in today's world of pure normality is overdone. Like we saw from Deadpool with Paul, and here now with Thunderbolts, Bob. I get it. The cursed names that parents give us almost act as a curse through life that match the person's looks. You think of Chad as a macho man, Sebastian as a savant, Jake the jock, then we have Bob and Paul. And thinking back to the Bob and Pauls I know, it's not too far off in the mental image of hilarity. But the point being, we get that Bob is a funny name in current times, but here it is merely banked on the hilarity of saying Bob versus what we get from the visual of Paul in Deadpool. And I'll just say it, in Thunderbolts, Bob is the best looking Bob I've ever seen. Disagree? Think about the Bobs in your life and just kind of ponder it and say I'm not wrong. I'll wait. And Googling images of Bob is cheating, just FYI. That's what I thought. Okay, hang on. If you're Googling, I'll give you an update. I'll advise you here. I'll just give you the answer to the test, if you will. If you're Googling it, if you typed in good-looking Bobs, you're just going to get haircuts. If you type in good-looking men named Bob, you're going to get Bob Barker and Bob Marley. So I'm going to contradict my point. Those were pretty good-looking Bobs. Now, that aside, Thunderbolts does have some fun dialogue that can come across as recycled and cliche. The direction from Beef director in 2012's Robot and Frank Jake Schreier utilizes some good character direction to ensure we don't get the feeling of we have seen and heard all this before. It never really feels recycled. Schreier's eye for character focus and heart comes into play, and it just works to expand these characters to ensure that even though there is no Thor or Captain America or Iron Man, they feel relevant and deserve to be there. With the exception of our villain, Valentina, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who appeared for the first time in the end credits back in Black Widow in 2021, where I felt during that time, this really isn't going to work. Please let this just be one cameo. But let's see where it goes. In every appearance since, including Wakanda Forever, it still doesn't work. Her performance doesn't work. She just doesn't feel like she belongs in the film like this. Dreyfus's performance comes across as very cartoonish, sitcom-y, where she never feels like a complete threat, where we can see her facial expressions on what she is about to say or do before she even says or does anything. Watching Dreyfus in this role made me appreciate even more so Viola Davis's portrayal and performance of Amanda Waller from the DC films even more than I already did. Now, to get to the meat and potatoes of Thunderbolts, does Thunderbolts completely make up for the lack of quality of Marvel films recently? The answer is no. It doesn't try and reinvent the wheel, but it rather gives us nostalgic feelings of early Marvel films in style and simplicity, with an amplified heart and charm to it. Thunderbolts has its flaws of being recycled and having renewed conflicts and cliches, but where it has flaws, it does a good enough job to keep us distracted from really homing in on the flaws with the performances that just seem to flow. And by the time we get to the climax, we feel a real stake for our heroes. It's hard for me to call this a great movie because it really doesn't add anything new to the table, but for as much fun as I had while watching, I'm going to give this a marginal recommendation. I'm giving Thunderbolts 3 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now.
Now available on video cassette.
Everything is based on memory and warfare that will linger in my memory, receiving 3.5 stars. They're gonna make a killing in Death of a Unicorn that wasn't as magical fun as I was hoping for, receiving 2.5 stars. This summer, no one is safe, including the audience that paid to see it in Hell of a Summer. That's campy, silly, but the cast is the only ones in on the joke before the audience, receiving 2 stars. Anthony Hopkins plays a cat-and-mouse game with Bill Skarsgård in a locked luxury vehicle in Locked, which was in the moment entertaining until the climax where, given the 2 fine actors, we should have gotten more, receiving 2.5 stars. The future favors the brave in Captain America Brave New World, and the brave was the ones that bought a ticket to yet another meh Marvel movie, receiving 2 stars. Human Traffickers Beware, it's another Jason Statham movie that we all know what's gonna happen in A Working Man. Here's a hint. he beats up and kills a lot of people. A Working Man received 2 stars. Today's the day in a movie that teases suspense but ends up being an emotional reflection, and I was fine with it, but others may not seem it my way, in The Woman in the Yard, receiving 2.5 stars. Porky Pig and Daffy Duck are Earth's only hope in their first big screen team-up in The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie that was loony as it was touching and entertaining, receiving 3.5 stars. He's Dying to Save Mankind and Mickey 17 that consistently battles itself for substance versus spectacle, receiving 2.5 stars. When the odds are unbelievable, show the world you're unbreakable in The Unbreakable Boy that actually shows vulnerabilities and humanity, and that makes this a hopeful and happy tearjerker, receiving 3 stars. Everyone dies, and that's fucked up in The Monkey, which I wish that said it's fucked up more in this movie, receiving 2.5 stars. Meet Nathan Kane, he can't feel pain in Novocaine, that after we get the premise, the film doesn't do anything with it, but becomes just a mere novelty, receiving 2 stars. A Little Bear goes a long way, and that's the truth. In Paddington in Peru, even though innocent enough, this bear isn't challenged enough to do something different, receiving 2.5 stars. Espionage is deadly, marriage can be deadlier. And again, ain't that the truth? In Black Babe, which was a stylish mystery thriller and so far one of the best movies of the year, receiving 3.5 stars. And finally, Don't Forget to Breathe, from utter boredom in Last Breath, that received 2 stars. You can check out those reviews of my previous episodes, and while you do, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe, and please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out one of the podcasts that are part of my weekly listening routine. They add some sugar and some spice, talking about baking and murders in the Sugar Coated Murder Podcast. The link to that show will be in the description of this episode. But let's hear from Karen and Ann over the Sugar Coated Murder Podcast now.
Hey, Ann Barner. Hey, Karen Beatty. We need a promo. You know, like where we talk about what we do on our podcast.
On our Sugar Coated Murder Podcast? Like how we love to bake and talk about murder?
That's what we need to talk about.
There you go.
I think we've talked about it. Y'all find us on all your favorite listening apps.
Stay sweet.
And don't murder.
Because if you kill people,
we will talk about you.
A man returns to the nostalgic beach of his childhood to surf with his son. When he is humiliated by a group of locals, the man is drawn into a conflict that keeps rising and pushing him to his breaking point. Nicolas Cage stars in The Surfer.
You can't stop a wave. Born in a storm, way out to sea. Pure energy. And it's all building to this breaking point.
Hey! Uncle's Army!
I grew up here.
Don't live here. Don't surf here.
Hey, Dad.
It's okay. You're scaring my boy.
Now. No need for all this fuss. Listen to me, brother. I know it's smart to lose face in front of your boy, but you gotta know when to back down, or it could get a whole lot worse.
This is a special place for us. It was magic here when I was your age. My old house is finally for sale, and I'm buying it.
Just want to go home now.
Wake up.
Locals only. Don't live here, don't surf here.
I'm not surfing. There's a view for locals only as well. Hey! Hey!
Men are like engines. You've got to release a little steam now and then or you'll blow up.
That's my board, and I want it back.
Listen, mate, I think you've been out in the sun too long.
No, my father gave me that board.
I can tell you myself, that old board's been up there for as long as I can remember. She's a beaut, isn't she?
I'm not trying to be cruel. We don't belong here anymore.
All I want is to take my son surfing.
Don't kid yourself now. Before you can have everything, you have to experience nothing.
What?
Pathetic.
That's a good one.
You know, in the past couple of years, I have stated on this show that I have begun to really look forward to seeing a Nicolas Cage movie when it hits theaters. Given a couple of missteps, given that fact, Cage has actually picked some pretty smart projects. Now comes The Surfer that really does showcase Nicolas Cage, and it almost acts as a one-man show. But as we get into The Surfer, into the second and third acts, it begs the question, should it feel like a one-man show? The Surfer was written by Thomas Martin in his first really wide-release film, and the first half of the movie does a fantastic job on building a mysterious thriller. But then we can visually see Martin get lost in his own thoughts, where the surfer can go multiple directions to make the viewer think that we are in for a good little twist towards the climax. Even to the point I thought I figured out where this movie was going to go, given some of the symbolic hints the movie presents. But then, instead of Martin building on his own intriguing ideas, it takes the side road of just becoming a generic ending. And that makes the movie just generic. Nicolas Cage plays our character simply called the Surfer, who takes his son, played by Finn Little, on a surprise trip before Christmas. While Cage is at the beach, he takes a call from his wife, which signals that he's in the middle of a divorce. Cage's whole intent is to take his son surfing at his childhood spot, where he grew up, and he intends to buy his grandfather's old house on the beach, in hopes to save his marriage and give his son a true home. Now, between the phone call with his wife and flashbacks of a traumatic event and hints at a traumatic event, this is one of many aspects this film presents but never truly explores. It merely just throws in these hints as a driver of mystery and build that ends up with a complete letdown. Our writer Thomas Martin does this quite often, but in complete fairness, in the moment it works for build. But by the time we leave the theater, I scratched my head and just said, why? We even take Cage's son, where we see him in the first act, and he just merely disappears until the climax, which leaves the viewer asking the question of why. We also have a homeless character played by Nick Chasm, who lives in the parking lot of the beach in his car. He, early on in the first act, warns Cage of the locals being territorial of the beach, and his suspicion of the gang on the beach killed his son and his dog. Again, we see Chasm in the beginning, and again, not till the climax. Between the conversation with Cage's wife, some added tension between Cage and his son, and the homeless guy in the first act, Cage then takes his son down to the beach with, of course, this is where our main conflict happens. The locals threatening Cage and his son to leave, for the beach is for locals only. This is where Cage becomes obsessed and stays in the parking lot while we watch one event, one situation after another unfold upon Cage. That makes us wonder if it's in his head or the events are truly real. Now, I'm going to bring this up a couple times because Martin's writing here, it dangles a carrot in front of our face, thinking that this movie is going to be bigger than what it is. And with the direction in particular, in theory, it would have been smart direction for the movie to go all in on these concepts that Martin presents. We get overwhelming hints of something bigger, and I found myself entertained by solving the mystery before I got to the climax. But we have lingering questions while we watch. For example, while Nicolas Cage spends the night in his car, we ask ourselves the question, where is the homeless man? His car's in the parking lot. Does he not sleep in his car either? Where is Cage's son? Did Cage get a hotel? And why doesn't Cage go sleep in his hotel? And why does he choose his car? And how long is Cage there? What is the time frame? What seems like days looks like weeks. We see multiple hints at nighttime of him sleeping in his car and days going by, but how long is it? We get distracted where we can't pinpoint how long Cage is actually in this fucking parking lot. And by Cage's appearance, it makes it look like weeks or even months at times. Why does the time feel so off in this film? I had multiple theories during the movie, from time travel to different versions of Cage's character over time to just pure mental instability. The Surfer made me bring out my mental spiderweb chart to try and connect the dots and find a rhyme or reason to what this movie is trying to tell us. And it was entertaining to try and figure this out. But again, These are questions that encourage the viewer to actually stay with this movie, especially when we pivot to a Cage one-man show of madness. But our writer, Martin, again gets lost in his own thoughts on where to take this film. And the ending result is just a lazy, limp climax. And this movie, given what were presented in the first and second act, deserved better. Especially with fantastic performances from our cast. Cage does do a good job here, but the real standout here is Scully, our Beach Gang leader played by Julian McMahon, who gives a monologue in a scene about strength and masculinity. That again adds to the hanging fruit of mystery. And this monologue does kind of give hints to what's going to end in the climax, but it feels more outlandish and safe for where the movie could have gone. Now The Surfer was directed by Lorcan Finnegan, who directed 2019's visually chilling Vivarium. Finnegan does have an eye for capturing a visual of madness from material, and we do get that here. And where the problem could land without giving all the blame to our writer Martin is that Finnegan wanted to create a movie of madness versus just a thriller, and it contradicts Martin's screenplay. Martin and Finnegan's visions we can see at a constant tug-of-war on what it wants to be. But at the end of the day, and in the moment of viewing, both visions work. But two people can't win at tug-of-war, but two people can lose. And in this case, by the time we get to the climax, each one slips in the mud and falls over to just drop the rope. The Surfer is an effective thriller. It's an effective, mysterious thriller with some great performances and good build-up tension. But by the time we get to the climax, it never comes together, and we discover the movie took us on a journey hinting at a mystery, hinting at something thought-provoking, even leading us to tell a message. The Surfer makes us ride the wave of storytelling, enticing us with a big impact, but in the final moments, the wave pulls our board out from underneath us and just becomes a pure wipeout. It leaves us with more questions than answers. But for what it is, the journey is entertaining. It's an effective thrill ride. It makes us think during the ride, the journey. And I had fun placing the dots together of what this movie was going to be. But at the end of the day, this is one of those movies that the climax will deceive you and it will piss you off. The journey was a fun, effective ride. The climax just sucks. I'm giving The Surfer 2.5 stars. A boy left to fend for himself and his younger brother following their parents' death in 1880s Wyoming goes on the run with his long-estranged grandfather after he is sentenced to hang for the accidental killing of a local rancher in Rust.
Lucas, look!
Lucas Hollister, I hereby sentence you to hang.
Who are you?
My name's Rust. Your mom, Wilhelmina, was my little girl.
I can't leave my brother. I gotta go back.
There ain't no going back. It's not my job to take care of you, it's to keep you alive.
I never met nobody hunted a man like you. Arland Rust. I want this son of a bitch, Wood. I'll give you, man, resources, whatever you need.
This ain't no game, boy. Some things in this life you can't get back.
Can you do this?
Yes, you can.
Now, It's hard to review Rush without mentioning the tragic death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins back in 2021 after a gun with a bullet in the chamber was handed to the lead star Alec Baldwin. There are multiple opinions on how this movie should have been handled. Some say it should have been scrapped altogether, some say it should have been continued in honor of Hutchins. Being transparent, before the review, I will say I was on the side of just scrapping the film altogether, but that was out of pure emotion of hearing of a death of a human on a sloppy and lazy handling of props. It was a senseless death of a talent that I will talk about here in a second in my review. This is where emotion can kind of just overpower in the moment. That sometimes we can react to an incident and just go all in on those emotions. But after watching Rust, I'm glad it wasn't scrapped because given some aspects of the film, more particular the cinematography and the look of the film, this would have turned Hutchins' tragic death into another tragedy that people weren't able to see this film, and seeing her best work visually. And again, I'll touch on that in a second. But in no way, I just want to be clear, in no way will the controversy behind the production of Rust guide this review. Now, with that said, Rust is now available to rent or buy on respected streaming platforms right now. But I did view it in one theater that is playing it locally, which I would recommend. If it's available locally in one of your theaters to go see it, then go see it. Not because Rust is an amazing movie, but it looks fantastic. And even though only on production for 15 days before the incident, the scenes Hutchins were involved in will take your breath away. Now, with the tragic death of Hutchins, Bionica Klein had to take over as cinematographer, who recently did 2021's Marcel the Shell with the Shoes On. And no disrespect to Hutchins, but both cinematographers add a magical touch to make this movie visually appealing as it is. It's an absolutely beautiful movie to look at. And that's where my recommendation is going to be with this movie, is to go see it on the big screen because it does look amazing. It's a magical visual that you will see on screen. Now, with that said, it's obvious that the real star of the show is going to be the visual appeal of it, the visual look of it, but when it comes down to the overall value of the film, it starts strong with our real star newcomer, Patrick Scott McDermott, who plays Lucas, who has to care for his family as the man of the house, in which we get shots of him feeding the farm animals, shopping for supplies, until an altercation with a townsboy in a market, defending his family, broke another boy's arm. This leads to a lawless vision of dread where the father of the son with the broken arm attempts to force Lucas to help him on his farm for the loss of help. And I will leave the in-between for you to discover. But Lucas ends up in jail and on death row with a visit from his old relative he has never met, Evelyn, played by Frances Fisher, who wants to at least see him one time before his death, which leads into a rescue by his estranged grandfather, Harlan Russ, played by Alec Baldwin, who is to get him to safety, and the two are on the run from the law with a price on their heads. Rust was written by Joel Souza with nothing really notable on his resume, at least anything any good, and also Alec Baldwin, who did help write the story. And this is where the true problem really lies, is while the opening act is engaging and holds stake with our Lucas character, the moment Baldwin's character comes into play, there is nothing interesting that happens, no real believable chemistry, and no emotional build. When our Lucas character is on screen in the first act, again played by Patrick Scott McDermott, the writing has an emotional, relatable stake. McDermott's performance matches the stakes. We want to root for Lucas. But that is torn away with screen time by Baldwin. That when he gets a writing credit, you know he has to have the most screen time. And there is nothing of substance of his character, nothing interesting that he does, and nothing to help build the chemistry of our Lucas and Russ character that's not situational. Our McDermott performance, along with the visual substance we get from our two cinematographers, fills in the blanks to add some beauty. But then we have to give in to a Baldwin film. And this is the misstep, is we get the hook of our child that viewers can relate to, we can sympathize with, but it's taken away by characters we can't. And when it comes to Alec Baldwin's performance, I don't want to assume anything, but the price is in the pudding of what we see on screen. This isn't a great performance. It's a very bland performance. Whether he was under pressure of legal issues or the fact it was the act he ended a life that was out of his control or not, it doesn't really matter. But the situation and the going forth of this project, I'm not going to get into that. but I will judge the performance. It was completely off. And that is what matters, is the ending result of what we see on screen. And to an extent, I can understand either way. This was a dramatic production. Legal or moral stresses or both is going to put his mind out of the game, and we can visually see that here. When it comes to Alec Baldwin's performance, it feels like he's literally just reading his lines to get through this project while McDermott does circles around him to build some emotional stakes on screen. And what is a real shame that when Alec Baldwin's on screen, McDermott's dialogue is limited. That is a complete shame because he is driving this movie along with the visuals. This is where our writer-director Joel Souza should have realized what situation he was in the production and pivot to make this movie a strong finish and look towards the strength he had, which was McDermott. And at this point during the halt production, we should have done some rewrites to include more dialogue from McDermott to really help drive the emotional stakes of this movie. The journey between Baldwin and McDermott tends to just drag on in situation to situation without connecting any emotional dots that we can feel the movie is intended to do. But as our duo's journey goes on, it just feels like going from place to face a situation with no substance in between. And with a mediocre performance from Baldwin versus an emotional one from McDermott, it just doesn't work. Rust could have been something special with a taste of the work we see from the scenes of Hutchins and the work finished by Bianca Klein and the performances from McDermott. The movie looks fantastic and we do have a solid performance here. But Rust is misguided with a production of tragedy. And to be clear, I'm not here to review a movie because of tragedy or controversy, but this is what saves the movie, is the visuals and McDermott's character. McDermott's character and performance works. Baldwin's character and performance doesn't. Baldwin's character actually does take away from any emotional build or build a chemistry the movie wants to create. I can tell the movie wants to create an emotional stake, but the cast isn't in it. And I understand that. I recommend Rust for the look and an introduction to Patrick Scott McDermott, but that's it. And of course, the biggest part of tragedy here is the loss of a human life. That's the most important thing. But also, the tragedy here of what this movie could have been if the production didn't face a useless tragedy. The movie could have been something great. We can see some potential here. We can see some greatness in this movie of what it could have been if it didn't face tragedy. But we can also tell that this movie just wanted to end. It just wanted to be done with production. And with that, I can see the potential. I can see some great things in this movie, especially with McDermott's performance and the visuals. And that's worth seeing by itself. But as a holistic movie, I can't recommend it. I'm giving Rust 2 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you haven't yet checked out the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony, make sure you do. Again, the link of that show will be in the description of this episode. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film and support your local movie theaters.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.
Let the credits roll. We say farewell. Join us next time. We'll have more tales to tell.